I played my first test match with a twisted colon due to anxiety and stress.
Bobby Skinstad, a former South African rugby star, is well known for his dynamic play as a loose forward.
South Africans, unashamedly, we're bloody good at sport. For a tiny little democracy, a little pimple on the backside of Africa, as someone said to me that.
One of his career highlights was being part of South Africa's victorious 2007 Rugby World Cup squad.
In my career, I was very lucky to prove myself as a player and then get accepted as a player and an individual. But it's a battle that you fight at different times of your career.
He won numerous accolades, including 3 Currie Cup titles with Western Province and a Tri-Nations title in 1998.
He rose to the top of the rugby world, but that doesn't mean he doesn't struggle.
Well, every time I do something, I'm constantly questioning whether I'm good enough at it.
He is not shy with his opinions.
When you go to school in the UK and kids are elbowing you out the way on their way to the cafe or past you on the way to the cricket field. I mean, it's a completely different environment. And I think that some of what we are experiencing at the senior level is because of that.
All this and more coming up on the Privileged Man podcast.
So, Bob, welcome to the Privileged Man podcast. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. So, as I do with most of my sports guests, I ask a few quick fire questions. So, I thought we'd start off with that. Is that cool?
No problem at all. That's fine.
First up would be, what's your most memorable moment playing rugby?
I think, I was incredibly lucky. So I used to say, any match that we won, but I was incredibly lucky to be part of some great teams, and we won a World Cup in 2007, and there were good and bad bits about that, but probably the memory of being part of a World Cup squad and managing to come out on the other side was definitely my most enjoyable memory.
Awesome. And on the flip side, your toughest defeat?
In that very same year, and that's why I say, so we actually were in the Super Rugby final, and we lost to our big rival, the Bulls from upcountry, by 1 point in the final second in that match. So that still hurts. My old mate Ryan Habana scored the try. I do really apologize for it, so I'll have to get squeeze an apology out of him. But certainly that was one that sat in a bad way for a long time.
Yeah, sure. Most shocking moment?
Shocking moment. I think my dad was a doctor, and my dad actually ran onto the field when I was injured at Twickenham. He sidestepped the sort of wardens and the volunteers and got past the touch judges and everybody, and then nudged the ref out the way to check that I was okay. I sort of looked up and I saw the circle of people, including like the team doctor and everyone. I dislocated my shoulder, and I looked, and there's my dad's face. That was definitely the most shocking. I was like, what on earth are you doing here? And he basically just come in to check that I was okay. Just an amazing moment for how freakish it was. But he got kicked out of the stadium for basically running onto the field of play, and then talked his way back in. He told one of the nice old ladies who was running the ticket booth that his son had been injured and he'd run on, and he wasn't actually a naughty boy, and she let him back in.
Did he actually get escorted off?
He did, yeah. So I mean, I couldn't sort of worry about him, but the two men in the big yellow jackets, etc., ordered him off and then kicked him out and said, "You get on with your day somewhere else."
That's classic. And your toughest opponent?
I think we, as a team, we always used to have great respect for the All Blacks. And the clashes we had against them. Internally in South Africa, we would have big matches. A lot of my rugby was domestic at the beginning, because we'd only just sort of made it back into international sport. And I'll never forget getting a tackle from a fly half called Henry Honeyball, who was a fantastic player. I ended up playing in the Springboks with him, but he was just so tough. I should have known, because his nickname was Lem, which is Afrikaans for blade. And I picked up the ball at number 8, and he cut me in 2. So he was definitely my most respected opponent. After that, I always checked out where he was. I didn't want to be tackled by him. Everybody, including All Blacks, anyone we played against was always had one eye out for Henry Honeyball because he was such an amazing tackler.
Okay, and your favourite current rugby player to watch?
I'm enjoying. I really enjoy the evolution of rugby. I think the loose forwards went through a period where there was just sort of bish bosh and carry, and I think actually now they're getting ball in hand and interacting in the outside backs. So I've got to say that in any of the French loose forwards, and there's probably 4 or 5 in their squad who are outstanding at the moment. The young South African loose forwards as well. I'm really enjoying. Standouts. I mean, obviously Antoine Dupont because of the way he's just a live wire with the ball and the team around him, rally around him, and he's a born winner. I suppose, those two. I would probably say Josh van der Fleer, Callan Doris as well. Some of the Irish loose forwards. Anyone who's got the ball in the outside backs, who's a big 6'5", 6'6" guy with a bit of pace, causes havoc. So they're always useful out there. And then obviously I'm super passionate and proud South African. So Peter Steph du Toit in the World Cup final was imperious. 29 tackles, I think 20 plus carries, workhorse. I don't think I made 29 tackles in my whole career. So I've got to look at that and say, best modern day performance I've seen.
Yeah, amazing. It was an incredible World Cup. Amazing. And final quick question. What was maybe this isn't such a quick question. What was your biggest internal battle in your rugby career?
Well, given what I know about you and the podcast and people talking about different battles, I've had to think this week. I mean, it's not always easy to bring up, but I started in the Springboks as very much an outsider. I was one of 2 English-speaking players in the pack. One of them was the captain and had been around for 14 years. And I was 20, 21 at that stage and was English speaking, and I wasn't really accepted in it all. So I suppose making the team that was your dream team to make and then not feeling as if you belonged was a really difficult juxtaposition for me as a young man. I played my first test match with a twisted colon due to anxiety and stress because of worrying about fitting in, worrying about performance, worrying about being a bigger part of the team, wanting to be a leader in that environment, etc., but feeling very much as an outsider. So that was a juxtaposition. It obviously calmed down over my career. I was very lucky to prove myself as a player and then get accepted as a player and individual. But it's a battle that you fight at different times of your career.
And by twisted colon, I mean, were you one of these players who got sick before games?
No, not really. I had a couple of players that I played with that used to vomit from nerves, etc. That wasn't me. Now, I had a twisted colon is I think it manifests itself from internal anxiety. So it's basically a very painful intra-stomach reaction to outside stress, etc. I don't know all the details, but I know what it's referred to, and I've heard of it in gymnastics, and I've heard of it in individual sports as well afterwards. But my dad was a not only a pediatric oncologist, but he was also a house doctor, a GP, a highly qualified GP in the later stage of his career, and him and the team doctor both diagnosed me with the same thing. So it was something. It becomes debilitating. It's like a highly advanced stomach cramp is the best way to probably describe it. Yeah.
Really uncomfortable. And when you started playing, did that dissipate? Was that something that just was before, or did the whole feel?
In the day lead up to the match, actually, I was sort of on player watch a little bit. I'm not sure if the management were 100% sure that I should be playing, but I played that match anyway. I think it does. Yeah, if you try and suppress it, it sort of goes away for a while. So certainly I don't remember it hindering me, although I didn't play very well. So maybe I could attribute that.
There you go. And that feeling, like gut-wrenching feeling, like I can sort of feel when I when I went into certain lessons as a kid. I can really sort of feel that, oh God, I just am so nervous about being found out. I had, was dyslexic and really struggled at school. When you were in your adult, and I guess in your more adult life, have there been occasions when you've felt that same feeling, that same sort of gut-wrenching feeling of nerves?
Try every day. Absolutely. Yeah. No, for me, sort of imposter syndrome type positioning as an individual. Every time I do something, I'm constantly questioning whether I'm good enough at it, or I went through a period when I was playing where I was very good at what I did, and I recognized that, and I was very confident in it. But it was a short window. I can starkly feel the difference of walking out feeling, whatever I touch is going to work, versus on the way there when I hope everything I touch works, or some of it works, and then on the way afterwards where I'm not sure if I should, and et cetera, et cetera. And they're so stark, the different types of feeling. One is a confidence and comfort and belonging and participation, and you're actually everybody else's battery. You're a giver in the highest sense of the word, because although you're performing, everybody's feeding off your energy. Everybody's sort of playing and in sync with what you're doing, etc. And it's an incredible feeling in that state of flow. And I think the rest of the time you're looking for it. So the difference is quite stark when you understand it or you feel it. Sometimes I would get that feeling in training. When you feel your body, I don't know, some fitness trainers concentrate on skill work to make you improve the amount of time and effort that you make in fitness. So it's not just sort of running 200 yards or 400 yards or 600 yards. It's playing a game until you almost can't, but then to win the game, you've got to play again, so carry on, and the whistle doesn't go, and et cetera, et cetera. And that state of flow, once you're in that, is very similar. You're feeling that everybody else is falling off the pace and you're just hitting your stride. And it's an amazing, I can imagine, I don't know, I'm not very good at maths, but I can imagine someone who can solve a puzzle or a mathematics puzzle very quickly, feeling the gap between them and everybody else is the way I sort of sometimes try and explain it. Sort of, you can almost see the solution popping up off you. When your body and your brain says run at an angle or a direction, I've found later on, I'm like, I don't know why, that's almost unteachable. You know what I mean? I sort of used to do, and then people would say, why on earth did you turn up there, or what were you doing there? It's just a gut feel thing. So, and that gut feel is probably that highest sense of flow, if you know what I mean. So
yeah.
That and the difference between it are quite stark. I think that's why a lot of sportsmen and women feel the big sort of crash, the dip, post game or post competition or post endeavor.
Yeah. Well, thank you for summing that up so well. I mean, your outward projection, LinkedIn and social, and being on, being a pundit, outward projection is very confident, knowing what's going on in life, sort of giving direction, as you say, is that sort of leader that you were on the rugby pitch. Do you still feel that's, you talked about imposter syndrome. Do you still feel that sense on a daily basis?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and please take this from whence it comes. I'm incredibly privileged and lucky. I've got 4 wonderful young kids. I've been happily married, since my early 20s. I travel internationally. I do work, I'm not struggling financially, although I'm constantly trying to work out how to put kids through school and universities, and I want the best for them. And, so for me, in a way, I think because you try and be a high achiever, nothing's ever good enough. Mm-hmm. So then everything you endeavor to do is the same. So I want to, use LinkedIn as an example. Social media, the social media phenomenon is so prevalent. I need to choose one, and which one would I choose? And for me, LinkedIn they were advertising, I think at the time, they said we've got 880 million people who are trying to connect with other business people. I was like, well, that's right up my street. And then I went into, how it works and what you do. And the stories that you can tell are often focused on, yes, what you're trying to achieve, but also what you see. So people might say, oh, it's nice he supports that team. But, if I do something about my favorite football team, Arsenal, I might talk a little bit about the brand or a little bit about the highs and lows of the season, or, so there's a story looping back to what I do. And because I do some punditry and after dinner speaking and that kind of thing, there's always a story element to what I do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for explaining that. I mean, awesome highlight of Arsenal there, by the way. Right. Stamp of approval. Yeah.
Well, the fixtures have just come out. So we're playing Wolves at home in the first fixture of the next Premiership season. I can tell you because I set my alarm for the 9:00 announcement from the Premier League.
We'll come on to it in a bit about, the passion that South Africans have for sport, particularly in other countries. I think we can, as Brits, we're quite spoiled by the amount of football, rugby, cricket, etc. that there is just on home soil. I'm always fascinated by this sort of outside-inside look. But just coming back a little bit to, because I asked a question about whether you had this thought process about not being a good enough, still sort of seeping around in your adult life, and then what I heard from your answer is that there was sort of almost like, I've got all of this, so I shouldn't be saying anything bad. And that for me was, and my journey was actually the part which I sort of really had to battle through, because, going to great schools, having a great family, having great friends was the part that I was most in shame about. I was just like, I can't complain. It's definitely not going to be something that I do because I'm so lucky. Material privilege was there. Love was there. But at the same time, my mental and emotional well-being was not. And that's why I've called my podcast The Privileged Man, because it was really a journey of privilege, from material privilege through to a mental and emotional state, which in this modern world seems to be a privilege, to have a regulated, as you just talked about regulation, a regulated nervous system that is actually not flying up and down on the daily. So I'm just wondering, you've come onto the Privileged Man podcast. What does privilege mean to you?
Well, I think it's a great question. I am. So a little bit about my background. So my dad was a doctor. I told you he was a pediatric oncologist, and he did his final qualification. He studied in Pietermaritzburg in Natal, and then he studied in Salisbury in Rhodesia at Birmingham University satellite campus, because it was the only specialist campus where he could get the oncology degree that he wanted to do. So he did the bulk of his studies in South Africa, and he went to what was Rhodesia at the time. And he studied there and actually started practicing there. Played rugby and was a member of the local community, and then got conscripted to fight in the Rhodesian bushwalk. And I was born, I think, the first year of fighting. I mean, they used to go and get deployed. So it was like, well done, you're a doctor, you're in, ex-medical and engineers force or whatever. So you will be distributed around the country depending on where you need it, based on what's happening at the time. And he was a young, able individual, and he said, cool, let's fight for freedom. And he believed in it. And that war hugely affected our lives. I mean, my mum's brothers were all very, very active. They ended up being various forms of scouts, mainly Zulu scouts, so hugely influential in that war, and were incredible fighting machines who'd left school at 16, 17, and 18 to go and save their country type thing. So you talk about privilege. I was privileged that they decided to have a go. The war ended and white Anglo-Saxons got kicked out of what had become Zimbabwe overnight by Robert Mugabe. And my parents left Rhodesia with everything that they could fit into a car plus $440 US.
Wow.
So what is privilege? Because they turned up with less than we'd ever had in South Africa. And my dad just set about making a life again. He got a job through a friend of a friend. He worked at Red Cross Pediatric Hospital in Cape Town, and went through sort of life. And funny enough, his parents had put him into what we call government school in South Africa. The schooling system's changed a little bit. There's a what they call now Model C school, which is a sort of an amalgamation of both. So partly paid government schools and some fantastic schools in South Africa have done an amazing job of adopting and adapting that new system, it's not fully government funded, because then there's probably not enough to keep the sport and all those kind of things going. And then what you do is you subsidize as parents, so they try and keep those fees low. And I don't see that model that much in the UK. I think they could probably do with it, especially with all the ramifications happening now with voting, etc. But anyway, back to what we were doing. And my dad basically worked that were close to where he would set up practices on either weekends and duty nights, so that I could get to go to those schools for a reduced fee.
Amazing.
But I went to great schools.
Mm.
And part of the conversation here, which actually, stimulates quite a lot of thinking for me, is that, was I privileged? And then people are like, oh, you went to Hilton College. And I know for a fact that it probably came close to bankrupting my parents, even with the discount that my parents got because of the work that my dad did.
Mm.
Was it a good decision? No, it was an awful decision financially from my dad, because he ended up working till 65, 66 and had a stomach tumor and died of stomach cancer. Like I deal with that mentally all the time. I'm like, is some of that my fault? Which is not something I'm proud of, but it's certainly something that I think affects how I look back, and I want to make sure that my kids know that what parents are going through is not necessarily that easy, but you need to make it, we're jointly making the best of it, as opposed to you're out there, you're so lucky and privileged child, or it doesn't matter, I don't care about your future. We're on a journey, and I'm trying to get that that sort of joint feeling going with my kids, but it's hard. It's you can't infer or impose privilege, and you can't infer or impose a feeling of sort of guilt on it without actually going on a journey with someone, and that's the thing. So I'd rather concentrate on the journey than the inference of the good or the bad. And I mean, my upbringing, I can't tell you how lucky I was. I went to amazing schools, usually little, quite private little schools, but very, we used to punch above our weight in all the sports, academically outstanding, and usually quite a big UK influence. So there would be a teacher or a person who'd come over and either set up a school because that was their background in the UK, maybe post-war, post-World War, etc. So all of my schools, Highbury Junior School and Hilton College Senior School, were started by immigrant teachers who, got to a place and thought, well, I don't have much to do, but I can educate all the farmers' kids or whatever it is, and have flourished into some of the best schools in the country at the moment. So awesome. Huge privilege in that space. Sorry, that's the longest answer you've ever had, I bet you.
It's a wonderful answer, because never judge a book by its cover. I just would have seen you white South African, went to private school, played rugby for South Africa, now works in London, super privileged the whole way through, but it's not. It's never like that. There's always a story. And you're as you rightly put out, it's a journey, and it's a journey that a lot of parents break themselves over to do what's best for their children. Just coming back and talking, I think so many sons have, relationships with their fathers which are complexed. and what you just talked about in terms of feeling guilty about his death. Did you ever ask him, Bob, did you ever say, look, I've got to go to this school. I've got to go to here, and there's no, sort of throwing your toys out the pram kind of thing. Is there any sort of guilt in there, or is it because most parents just do what's best for the kids, and the kids take on an inordinate amount of guilt that the parents never asked them to take on? I'm just wondering whether there's anything in that for you.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you've probably got a lot more experience in the space. I remember very clearly having a conversation where him and my mum said, because we had to write entrance exams, and I wrote for 2 different schools, and then they asked me which one I wanted to go to. There was never, and to be honest, the financial environment, you don't, when you're a 10, 12-year-old kid, you don't really get the concept, you know what I mean? And being a doctor in a small town, my parents, my dad joined the practice, and they had cash flow, but they didn't have savings. So they didn't have an environment of money that they could sort of lean back on. So then the cash flow, they would plow into the kids going to the school type thing. And we would drive on holiday instead of fly, but I always thought that was more fun. And little things like that. Or my parents, some of my friends would be going overseas, and my parents would tell me how much nicer it would be to go to the beach or the bush in Africa. And I'd agree wholeheartedly and head off to the bush without even ever thinking that that there was a difference, and that the difference might be privilege or wealth. So no, I would never say that they gave any guilt or imposed any guilt on me. It was probably something that I just carried myself.
Mm. So, I mean, if you were to have that conversation today, what do you think he would say to you?
I think he'd say, "Don't be silly." We decided to do that, and we, that's how we lived, and we enjoyed it. I mean, listen, that they got a lot out of the schools as well in terms of enjoyment and time with us as boys. And I went to boarding school very early because I enjoyed the environment. My kids only lived, 2.5 miles from my first school, a bit further from my high school, but I was at boarding. My dad worked super, super long hours, and I was at boarding school for ease of what happened. My parents, we probably had my mum with one car type thing, and I had 2 younger brothers, and boarding school was probably easier for them. But I asked for that myself. And I'm now looking back now, and I see the difference between boarding and non-boarding at a school here, and I didn't even know if I asked them if there was a difference in price. I just thought it must be an easy thing to do.
Mm. And tell me, your dad's just final question on your dad. I think it's a really interesting topic to explore, because do you, even as adults, as we were just talking about, even as sort of fully grown adults with kids, and it's always there. Once a dad, always a dad. So it's like, do you feel the financial hardship, maybe not hardship, but relationship that he had with money and, his purpose, does that drive you as a businessman now to earn enough money to make things more comfortable for yourself and your family?
It's a good question because it's a nuanced question. I mean, I think it does drive me. I don't think it immediately gave me the skills, because he inferred the skills of, hey, you can do anything type thing, or that the attitude of you can do anything, and sometimes that's not necessarily the best possible financial route. But I think, yeah, it's definitely a driver. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have 4 little kids. He had 3 and never moaned a single day, never said, "Oh, that's tough to put them through school." Now, I certainly don't want to be someone who's known to moan about that. Although with the cost of living and the price of schools in the future, it's a difficult thing not to at least factor in when you're planning and making long-term decisions. But yeah, I think more a driver to say, cool, let's make sure that the kids get as good a chance as they can, and they certainly, you want them to feel that they're as deserving of that chance as anyone in the world. Yeah, 100%.
And you obviously feel that they've got a better chance. Not so, I shouldn't say obviously. You feel, I guess, by living in the UK, that they've got a better chance in the UK than in South Africa. Is that right?
I did. I'm not sure at the moment. I question all my decisions all the time, obviously, because I think that's the best way to go about things. Until they're fully made. I think the UK is going through a difficult time at the moment, a very self-questioning, self-observing time in terms of governance, in terms of leadership. I think we've got a bit of a vacuum in terms of individuals that the country would be happy following. And we're sort of have become a nation of policy and prudence over actual firm leadership and proper governance of a country, because I think as we evolve as a society, it becomes harder and harder to put yourself out there, because you're constantly treading on somebody's toes or some party's toes or some group's toes. And everybody learns to lead by observing from the shadows and then nipping in and creating a bit of chaos and then nipping back again, as opposed to, right, I'm here, I'm going to give them my best go and do what's in front of me. So to be honest, I miss the discipline of school in South Africa, and I might actually look at that again for my junior kids going into high school. Recently had a visit back to South Africa and visited a friend of mine who's a headmaster at the school, and you walk in, everybody stands up, good morning, greets you, how can I help, what's happening, and you go to a school in the UK and kids are elbowing you out the way on their way to the cafe or past you on the way to the cricket field. I mean, it's a completely different environment, and I think that some of what we are experiencing at the senior level is because of that. I think even in families where kids are deferred to and screens are status quo at 24/7, I think the kids will suffer in the long term. I'm no draconian disciplinarian, please. Don't take me the wrong way, but I certainly believe in kids helping to have time spent outdoors, playing sport, practicing things, getting better at things, doing your homework, et cetera, as opposed to just existing on a virtual world with everybody else and ignoring your parents. I don't think it's healthy. And I see that more here than I do in South Africa. So I don't think for any stretch of the imagination that the future is suddenly amazing in South Africa. I'm comparing the two and cost, and I'm seeing that there's a benefit possibly to South Africa.
It's really interesting. I think the couple of things going on internally for me when you're speaking there, and I actually talked to Damien Hopley about this just post World Cup, about that internal spirit that's different in South Africa, it's different in New Zealand. But coming back to that, and that sense of why, that purpose of why people are so passionate about South Africa, and whether that's instilled right at the beginning. And I'm just thinking about the kids and what the kids get to see when they, in South Africa in comparison to what they see here, and that level of gratitude that you just is instilled just on a really base level. Here, you just see like a fair amount of just normality. Yes, there are people suffering. Of course, there are people suffering. But if you walked out the gates in South Africa, turn left or right, you would see a very, very different world with a lot of different looking people, right? Compared to what you would do here. And that instantly, from a very young age, is creating a lot more awareness of the realities of the global world that we live in. I just wonder if there's anything in that.
Yeah, look, so I've got some strong thoughts on it. I mean, I've got to be careful here because I'm not political in any way. I think white privileged South Africa, particularly English-speaking white privileged South Africa, suffered for many, many years being painted with the same brush as separatist National Afrikaans Party, which was creating and wreaking havoc in a racist sort of, I don't know, an awful, almost like a quasi state of chaos, if you know what I mean. They treated black, Indian, colored, any non-white people with the most terrible and tortuous environment you could even think you could imagine known to man. And my dad was quite active politically in his community and was very anti it. And we had these little pockets of sort of anti-governmental institutions. We had a Progressive Freedom Party, and we had what has morphed into the Democratic Alliance now, which is the opposition party. And anyone from South Africa who comes to the UK or the US or whatever is painted with the same brush. I mean, I walk down the street with a black friend of mine who played rugby with me, and they'll hear us speaking with a South African accent. The one guy will say, well, you're not from South Africa. South African people are black people. Or you'll say, well, you can't be a very happy South African because happy South Africans are white people. You know what I mean? Like all these sort of impositions on what you are. And we were painted with a brush of racism, of, terror spreading, of indoctrination of individuals, etc. And went through that until the early 90s. I was born in 1976. So I was a child of the democracy that came after. So Nelson Mandela came out of prison through an admission of mistake from the government and became the leader of the country in a first ever democratic vote, etc. in 1994. Okay. Absolutely incredible Rainbow Nation environment. Now, everybody's going, okay, well, the future is rosy, the future is bright, but nobody in that environment knew how to govern. They hadn't been in government in Africa at all. They'd been tribally managed environments or family managed environments. And what happened was that the lack of ability to govern allowed the country to fall off a cliff, as opposed to prudent fiscal management, things in place that you need to manage. I mean, we've got incredible resources in South and Southern Africa, from land to arable land to mining resources, et cetera. But we've had a government that for 25 years has been scooping that all into the back pocket. Now, I'm not saying that it didn't happen before, but we've had white people be very bad and we've had black people be very bad at government. Okay. Yeah. But we are an incredibly young, enthusiastic, well-traveled, well-versed, and hardworking democracy. We are a democracy. We've just had a vote that has taken that ANC government back out of majority rule. Now, like for me, it's probably not going to happen in my lifetime that South Africa will be governed on merit only and we will get rid of unemployment at the level that it is, et cetera. But we are getting closer than anyone else out of an African environment and Maya that they found themselves in to steering ourselves back to good governance. So I just feel that we've got so much to be proud of and pleased for. But if you allow people, and usually after a beer or two, to start thinking, oh, I wish it was like this, they end up going the wrong tendencies or blame or pushing and saying, oh, if the black guys didn't do this, or if the white guys hadn't oppressed us, or if the colored guys had helped us, or if the English didn't come in to our country in 150 years ago, or whatever it is, it was someone else's problem. But there are a couple of people out there who are actually doing good. And I think I'm trying to get myself to a point where I'm celebrating for that more than anything else. And if we can celebrate for that and put some guardrails in place, then I actually think we can go somewhere where we can have the benefits of all of the hardships that everybody's been through. They say, plant the trees, the shade of which in which you'll never sit. But plant them anyway, and that's the giving bit. And I think for the first time in a long, long time, I think there's a lot of people feeling that it might be turning in that direction. So that's my position on it at the moment.
Thank you for sharing with us. I mean, when you talk about being a white South African and being, oh, you're this and you're that.
Yeah, it's an incredible guilt that you take with. I mean, I had nothing to do with it. I was a first generation immigrant from Zimbabwe. Yes, I'm white and I don't look like every Zimbabwean that you've ever met, but I had nothing to do with apartheid. And I've taken that with me around the world. So it's something that is hard to try and sort of piece together for people who haven't got the inside story.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, you do look really like another Zimbabwean that I know.
We're probably related.
Probably in some capacity. I sail with them every week. But just on that, like, you know, I think there's a bit of, if you talk to Brits about how we've seen, you know, 200 years later, 300 years later, 400 years later, colonially, it's still underlying, right? And on the flip side of it, there is still an essence of superiority and entitlement that comes with being white and male that is still in the unconscious, stuck in the unconscious and the subconscious of the entire world, which is still creating so many issues. And so it's a real mission of mine to call it out. You know, the privileged man, to call out privileged men, to speak out about the way in which they truly feel on the inside. Like that, you know, to actually like start getting this, whatever it is, whatever needs to be said to get it out into the conscious rather than it being stuck in the subconscious. And I feel that these kind of forums are really important to talk about it. It's important for people to hear, you know, that, you know, there's this thing about male, white, male, sorry, hang on, get this right. Pale, male, and stale.
Yeah.
Right? And that we used to be the power source. We used to be the people who ran everything and dictated everything. And now there's this apologetic tone about being white and male. And we've got to be careful about what we say. And we've got to be careful about this and careful about that. To me, I say be aware about it. Understand our history, understand what has happened, but we've got to stop apologizing because we're also only here for, you know, maybe 80 years. And we have just as much right to have a mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically healthy life as any other person does. You got born during the apartheid. I got born during the Falklands War, where either of these things happen. But what happened what happened before us was not our fault. But there's a lot, I feel, through strong leadership, and strong leadership to me means that you can say, yeah, that wasn't right. That was bad. We don't need to stand up. Just
absolutely. Listen, I'm very vociferous in casting down the actions of a previous government, of other South Africans, for which I feel the responsibility. I absolutely do. I mean, I like to talk. I don't go around saying, I would never go around saying, oh, you know, not my fault. It was all them. I'm actually a nice guy. Because I mean, you know, on every street corner, every time South Africa comes to town, oh, bloody Yarpies are back and racists, etc. But if you think about it, we were portrayed as that for so long. Nobody's ever going to repaste that. You get Nelson Mandela come along and everyone goes, rah, rah, Nelson Mandela's great, but he's not really a South African. He's just a guy who's helping them for the moment. I'm like, actually, he's decided to embrace what it means to be a South African because of all the flaws and foibles of all of South Africa. That's the premise of the forgiveness that he's embodying, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I like to feel that there is something we can repair there, and something we can work on, and that's okay. As a young man, I didn't quite understand that that's something you could potentially take on in a personal level, and you know, I might be looking for a role or something where I could do something more in that space. You know, I've done charitable work and I've done other things which I feel are a little bit around the edge. I'm thinking more now, you know, how to get to the bottom of the causalities, the things that actually make the biggest difference. I mean, you spoke about it. South Africans, unashamedly, we're bloody good at sport. For a tiny little democracy on the you know, a little pimple on the backside of Africa, as someone said to me that. I'm not sure that's the nicest way to say it, but I know what you mean. And we're physical and we're strong and we've got, you know, national sports, but the government funding for sport has been awful. We've got two hockey teams, male and men's and women's hockey teams, which are both qualified for the Olympics and can't go because there's not enough funding. Now, for me, I'm going, you want to do something good, get those guys on television and get them to win something, because they can do what rugby has. I mean, rugby is this amazing unifier of our nation, black, white, and it doesn't matter background. Very few people in South Africa do not celebrate not only the growing representative sort of view and outside in look at the team. If you look at the team now, we've got, I think 16 of the 32-man squad are black and colored. That's overnight success if you ask it. In 1995, when we won it, there was one black guy, Chester Williams, and he was the toast of the town, and may he rest in peace. But he was one black guy in their team. Now you go under Sia Khaleesi, a black kid from a township leading the team and lifting the Rugby World Cup. I get goosebumps even thinking about it.
Me too. It's amazing.
That across 3 or 4 other sports. That is probably our raison d'etre. We could go out. It's a bit like Sevens rugby in Fiji. It's like, it makes everybody happy. It feeds people, but people play, the money goes back. Like, don't stop doing it. Let's make it better. So maybe there's a space where I can influence and do something there.
I reckon for sure. I think there's it's funny you mentioned Sia Khaleesi, because it does give me goosebumps. I mean, it's like, even as an Englishman, the impact that man has on that team. And
it's amazing.
On the nation.
Amazing. And he's shown such maturity, such empathetic leadership. Him and Erasmus, I played with Russie, and to get, that they are from the opposite corners of South Africa in terms of political background. Okay. But they are literally like brothers, you know what I mean? And you see them embrace, and you used to understand that actually they are not seeing color, race, discrimination, anything. They're seeing another man, a person who plays the game that they love, and that's it. Just, I love that, because it's an amazing visual. If you think about someone just seeing through all of the, whatever the outside skin, etc., straight to the heart of a person who's keen to achieve the same thing for one country. It's an extraordinary image to think about.
I mean, and just coming back to, I guess, the question around the kids and like what the makeup of it is. If I'm going to be really blunt about it, we've got some great role models in English football at the moment. People like Jude Bellingham. Phenomenal. And actually, they're probably a better, more grounded bunch than they were 10 years ago. But when, and that's a success story, but it seems to be a material success story. I mean, Marcus Rashford obviously has done some great things during COVID. Yeah. My question is, why is there just not way more of this? I know they're very busy, but see the way in which Sia's doing it in South Africa, the foundation. This is like, how you talked about kids on the screens and real life. Like, I think it's just this sense of being completely, if you'd spend a lot of time on the screens, either watching stuff or playing games, it's very difficult to have an embodied sense of gratitude. Whereas I think, and that's why, I've traveled a bit with my girls and will continue to travel to give them that broad breadth of, actually, you live in a peaceful country, in a country which is relatively got its race issues together, although some people do argue with me on that. And then, to show them a broader brush. And I feel, to me, with everything that's happening with AI, that's really going to be the education of the next 20 years.
Yeah, I think it has to be. I mean, I'm worried about a future that's dictated by AI, because it's much closer to a, genericism. Let's make something that 80% of the people agree with, and that's quite easy to sit on your couch and say, here's my vitriolic abuse of someone because I'm hiding behind my Twitter handle, or I'm hiding behind something that's just made up, because that person doesn't look like me, or I'm not as good as that person, so I'm going to have a go at them, or that girl shouldn't be running, or that boy should be, or whatever it is. And I do think, I do think we're in a difficult time at the moment. I mean, I think humans weren't made to just sit and I got to be careful here, because I'm not talking about the philosophical sense. Just sit and think, or sit and do. Actually, people were meant to walk and think and interact and engage and you can be as quiet as you want. You can be the greatest artist in the world, but you still engage with people or crowds, or Picasso hated time with anybody else, but spending time in markets and places to get influence for color and light and movement, and same with great poets and great artistic influence. But I see a lot of us, we're descending the me very quickly. And it's like, where I see it embodied the most is like, oh, did you see the latest video? Oh, but I mean, that is all controlled by an algorithm, which is pushing us to consume something that is advertising something or delivering to a platform that is generating money for someone, and we are literally the eyes in the audience, and the thing is, to turn all that on its head, you got to remember that all these platforms, if you're not making money out of them, you are the money that they're making out of it. You know what I mean? You are their audience. And I worry about our kids, because then what happens? You say, let's go on holiday. No, thanks. I'm going to watch someone else go on holiday on my screen, because it's, that's something I'm enjoying. I just don't think that's a future that we want to be part of.
No, there's a great book at the moment called The Anxious Generation by a guy called Jonathan Haidt. He's an American guy. He's got 4 things. Cut a long story short, teenage suicide, teenage harming themselves, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, all the indicators. They were going up, but 2010 came around and everything just is now skyrocketing. So the proof's in. Everyone thought, okay, this can't be great for mental health, all the rest of it, but the proof is now in. And he writes about this in great detail, but he talks about the 4 things. And the 4 things that we can do is basically no smartphones before 14, no social media before 16, have smartphone free schools, and I've forgotten the 4th one, but it was those 3 basically, like, there is no way without taking it away that you can control it. Like, they're so advanced. Even as adults, we struggle with the addiction to it. So how are we honestly meant to expect our kids to be able to deal with them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't stand on ceremony either. I tell my kids, or I'll say my daughter, okay, time off a screen, something, and now I tap my pocket to check I've got my phone with me before I move rooms. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm being, so hypercritical of them, but it's the same environment for me.
As a 47-year-old man, ex-international rugby player, on the face of it, successful businessman, everything is going on the face of it right for you. Who do you lean on when you don't feel so great, when you feel that imposter syndrome? Do you feel like you have a community of men that you share your shit with?
No. I had a bit of a wobble in COVID, and I had an English friend of mine, actually. We used to have long chats and walks, etc. He was going through a bit of a change of role, and as was I at the time. And we still talk about it. It was a sort of break in the clouds, if you want, because there was a good bit of sharing. He's a great guy. Our kids are now at different schools, so it's quite odd. I saw him for a catch up this week. I've got a very good friend of mine who I try and see as regularly as possible, who was the best man at my wedding, who's also moved over here. But besides, my parents are in SA. My wife's fantastic, but you can also only tell your wife so much, because we childhood sweet to teenage sweethearts. So we see each other all day, every day anyway. So you don't want to be, belaboring the point too much. I think I actually did some work with a girl who had been a senior executive in I think it was Tinder or one of the the sort of social media platforms, dating platforms here in Europe, as well as others. And she's put some huge research into that space. Like, who do people talk to? And is there an app or a space or an outlet for those people? And I think she's putting some time and effort into sort of the AI feature of a conversation you can have so that someone at least knows you are talking before you get to a place where you're not talking, if you know what I mean. Because I think with the third or fourth generation of the AI stuff, you're actually having a conversation with thousands and thousands of smart people and their inputs to make sure that you're okay to share something. And I understand that. I mean, I think the premise is amazing because, sometimes I look at my phone and I go, oh, well, I'm feeling really shit. Why don't I quickly look at the Premier League scores? As opposed to, I'm feeling really shit. Should I tell someone else? Should I go for a walk? What should I do? And maybe a place where you could say that, and that's why I think you've got a great platform where people do that and they're saying, what should I do? Because a lot of people are turning to, my vices over the years have been exposed to overly social alcohol and that kind of thing. And then I used to say, oh, well, that's easy. I'll go down to the pub. And you go down to the pub for too many. For the last 5 or 6 months, I got completely off alcohol because I was like, well, that can't be the answer every time. I now drink a non-alcoholic beer, which is nice because now I can, but I still enjoy a beer. And I will seek one out with friends, etc. But I'm trying to make it not be the answer that, if what do they call it? The social lubricant is actually, I'm just looking for instances where I can go and have that as opposed to,
sure.
I'm having it because I'm having a barbecue and that's it. And I can stop at one. And I think post sport and that kind of, you are constantly looking for that platform conversation place. And that's where the vices come in and they hook you.
They sure do. They sure do. But that's great that you've, that you're looking that bit deeper. Most men don't. And Bob, for big burly international rugby player to say that is really meaningful because there's so many.
It's terrifying, but it's meaningful.
Yeah, it's brave, courageous. And the more the likes of yourself say this, the more normalized it gets. The more people, this conversation may well right now sing to somebody who goes, I've got to stop just going to the pub for the answer. Okay, so last question that I ask everyone. So you've already almost alluded to it, but if you were to be given, let's say, the presidency of South Africa or given the keys to Downing Street, as one person said the other day, we really just need to bring in foreign managers now. What would be the one thing you would do?
One thing I would, it's an amazing question. It comes with a huge amount of responsibility to try and get it right because you don't want to criticize everybody and then not have some of the answers yourself. I think I would, in both instances, I would urge that we as leadership of the country or whatever it is under myself at that stage, established and then moved towards a system that improved the lives of everyone in the environment. I saw a fantastic article recently about a startup in the States where the CEO so got great funding and was tracking to everybody else's measurement of what's a good business. And then realized that his PA couldn't come to work because he paid her, $40,000 a year or whatever it is, which was not bad for her role. And, it was a small business. And he realized that he was adhering to everybody else's rules of what he needed to do for his business. So he changed the internal statute of his company. He said, it'll take us longer to hire, but we have a minimum salary of $70,000. And then a maximum salary of like $120,000. And he did that based on the fact that the salary of everybody working at his company needed to be able to pay off a mortgage that was relevant for a family that was in an environment that was serving the customers of the business that they were part of. Okay.
Wow.
And everybody wrote him off. Even some of the funders pulled out. And that was 3 years ago. and the business has quadrupled in size.
Awesome.
You know, and basically he took the stance. And what I, to be honest, what I'd absolutely love to do is make sure that I had the means myself, and then say, okay, give me minimum basic salary to survive at the level that I am right now, enjoy some time with my family and holidays and stuff, but let me govern as best I can at the lowest level and with a group of people who are happy to commit to the same, so that we can get the lowest level person up to the highest possible level the quickest. And then if you've got that as your premise, then it's not how can we tax those to feed those, or tax those to, you know, and it's not always this juxtaposition of someone benefits and someone loses. If you can do that collective, and for me, that's sort of that's a community management or a village management or something. You know what I mean? Like every village concept comes with, yes, but there's the wealthy toad on the hilltop type individual who's not actually in the same pool as everybody else. But if you could standardize it and create an environment where you were all benefiting, I'd like to be part of a governance system like that.
Amazing. Awesome way to round up. Thank you so much for coming on, Bob.
No worries. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.